I do want to move on to the other article. This is also going to ultimately be about politics. But we're going to start with a little smidgen of philosophy. Guys, second quiz question. What's an atheist's worst nightmare?
It's when you're trying to put the baby in the pot to cook it and the baby won't fit. That's the atheist's worst nightmare.
Good answer.
That's a good one. That was my second choice. I was thinking that some leftist academic writes a book about you after you die about what you got wrong and what you got right and why it still matters.
I like that one. But I'm afraid to say that is wrong, and I'm actually a little embarrassed for both of you because one of our greatest thinkers, Kirk Cameron, actually settled this question several years ago, and I think we even have the clip.
Hold this, Kirk. Behold the atheist's nightmare. Now, if you study a well-made banana, you'll find on the far side there are 3 ridges. On the close side, 2 ridges. If you get your hand ready to grip a banana, you'll find on the far side there are 3 grooves, on the close side 2 grooves. The banana and the hand are perfectly made one for the other. You'll find the maker of the banana, Almighty God, has made it with a non-slip surface. It has outward indicators of inward contents: green, too early; yellow, just right; black, too late. Now, if you go to the top of the banana, you'll find, as with the soda can makers, they placed a tab at the top. So God has placed a tab at the top. When you pull the tab, the contents don't squirt in your face. You'll find the wrapper, which is biodegradable, has perforations. Notice how gracefully it sits over the human hand. Notice it has a point at the top for ease of entry. It's just the right shape for the human mouth. It's chewy, easy to digest, and it's even curved toward the face to make the whole process so much easier. Seriously, Kurt, the whole of creation testifies to the genius of God's creative hand.
I mean, one thing that I really irks me about the whole thing is how you actually do eat a banana. Like there's this big debate online that you pinch it from the bottom and it just opens up real nicely. You don't have to cut it or anything.
Well, I was actually very unaware of the existence of this debate when we were talking about this on Slack beforehand. You gave me a bunch of links about different articles that came out at the time about the great how to eat a banana debate. But it is actually true that bananas are an extremely user-friendly fruit, very easy to open up, very sweet to eat. It is also true that this is a product of design, although in this case, as many people pointed out after, Kirk Cameron is the audience, Ray Comfort is the one who's actually speaking. After that video came out, that is actually human design and many generations of human genetic engineering to make that happen. But whether or not bananas are an atheist's worst nightmare, they're certainly a socialist's worst nightmare. So I believe we have a clip for this also.
So Sabrina, where do you come from?
I am from East Germany. Yeah, we never had bananas. So
You never had bananas in East Germany? Why not?
It was not available.
Yeah, this is a standard example that people often went to during the Cold War when they were talking about the inadequacy of the selection at grocery stores on the communist side of the Iron Curtain, the abject failure of that system to meet the consumer needs of ordinary people. And since East Berlin was the westmost point of the Eastern Bloc, and there was West Berlin there with regular capitalist grocery stores, that was a point of contrast between the two systems that was often used in, there's a whole genre of East German jokes that a lot of them are about bananas, like how to use a banana as a compass. You put it on top of the Berlin Wall, the part that gets a bite taken out of points east. And, the kind of top-down economic planning they had in countries like East Germany was great for rapid industrialization, for churning out tractor after tractor and tank after tank, and thank God for it, or there might not have been in East Germany since the Nazis might not have been defeated in 1945 by the Soviet Union, but it was very bad at meeting fine-grained consumer needs. The phrase that Bhaskar Sankara uses in his book, The Socialist Manifesto, is that that system, that kind of planning, was all thumbs and no fingers. Now, some of us think a better form of socialism than the politically authoritarian and economically dysfunctional one that existed east of the Berlin Wall is possible, that humanity has more choices than recreating East Germany or just accepting capitalism forever. But oddly enough, the idea that socialism means that you can't even have a fucking banana has resurfaced in 2023. And this time, the call is coming from inside the left. This all started with this guy, Malcolm Harris, who I believe in his tweets, he was actually subtweeting friend of show, genuine friend of show, Matt Huber, something that Matt had said about socialism and growth before. So here, I think, I don't know if we actually got, yep, here we go. So Harris says, this is his first tweet, pro-growth lefties accuse their opponents of being out of touch with working class preferences and focused on consumption instead of production. But what do they imagine planning support looks like for, say, fresh bananas at every American 7-Eleven among the world's banana workers? Next tweet. I think we better get planting those pawpaw trees. We're going to come back to that point about the pawpaw trees. Next tweet. That means fewer bananas for American workers, but if we're focused on production, not consumption, then the expropriation and suppression of Chiquita Corporation is obviously a huge win for the global working class as well as the environment. And then we've got one more. There need not be any moralism here. When you eat a banana, you're bad. Okay, that's good. Glad to hear that you're not bad for eating a banana. There just won't be any bananas because it doesn't make any other than capitalist sense to create a world-spanning daily banana infrastructure for people in Columbus, Ohio. And this thread, as funny as it sounds to say it, and as much as, I can sort of, look, as much as it's incredibly presumptuous to assume what anybody who's no longer with us would have thought about anything, in this case, it cuts against me because I just keep imagining a text from Michael Brooks where he's like mad that I'm doing this segment right now. It's like, why the fuck are you talking about bananas? But in any case, I think this sort of huge banana type of discourse that happened on socialist Twitter after this actually was interesting. I think there is actually some teachable stuff in there, because I think what this really exposed is this difference between a couple of different visions of what a post-capitalist future might look like. Is it the case that, for the sake of balancing everybody's needs and all this stuff, we need to actually scale back what we have under capitalism, or can we have generally shared abundance for everybody under a better system? So I wrote an article about this for Jacobin called "Socialists Really Do Have to Talk About Bananas." Say in the deck there, it's easy to mock the banana discourse that's materialized on left-wing Twitter in the last week, but there really are important issues here about how production and consumption would work under a feasible and desirable form of socialism. And what I tried to do there is to kind of think a little bit harder about and maybe share with readers who aren't familiar with this some of the work that's actually been done by socialist writers in the last couple of generations about how exactly production and consumption could be coordinated in a better version of socialism. People like David Schweikart wrote a really good book called After Capitalism, or Alec Nove wrote a book called The Economics of Feasible Socialism. And then to start thinking about, okay, like, would we actually have bananas? And Eric Levitz, I should say, wrote a good article about this in New York Magazine called "Will There Be Bananas Under Socialism?" And there's a little bit of a quote in mine where he says, "It isn't so hard to imagine socialists taking power in Ecuador and nationalizing its banana industry. but there's no reason to believe Ecuador would stop exporting bananas in that hypothetical. Workers in the global South's export industries generally agitate for a higher share of the income generated by such sectors, not for their abolition. And banana exports are integral to the Ecuadorian economy, accounting for more than 4% of GDP, employing 250,000 people and generating the foreign currency that it needs to pay its debts. Now, I guess if we're going to be scrupulously fair about it, maybe disregard that last point about foreign debt, because if we're imagining like truly global socialism, presumably Ecuador's debt would have been forgiven as part of this process. But I think a lot of the rest of those points still apply. And the best reason, there are a few not very good reasons I'll get to in a second, but the best reason to think that, okay, maybe you would want to like really dramatically scale back banana production is about labor conditions. Of course, labor conditions in every industry are terrible until the workers' movement comes on the scene. And in global South countries where you have often much weaker unions and much weaker regulatory state, et cetera, worse. But socialists don't generally assume those industries will cease to exist. We think that there can be better worker-run versions of them in the future. But the best reason in this case is some of the insecticides that are used to facilitate production at this mass scale, are potentially dangerous. And Eric, I think, says some plausible things about partial solutions to that in his article. But from my perspective, the main point is, okay, yeah, right now, but then agricultural technology doesn't just stand still. I mean, like right now under capitalism, it's progressing like crazy, right? The agricultural automation continues to pick up steam. And I'm very confused by the idea that we get this sort of really advanced global socialist society before agricultural automation picked up to the point where we could cut out the pesticides and, cut out human exposure, at least the pesticides, and continue to grow bananas at that scale. So when I wrote the article for Jacobin, I tweeted it out, and in the tweet, I think we have that, but anyway, if we don't, in the tweet, say something like, it's deeply misguided for socialists to buy into rhetoric about spoiled Americans needing to consume less, this is the part that bothered me most in a lot of the banana discourse, people being like, oh, you just want your treats. It's like, well, come on, man. Like, presumably we want working class people to have a better lifestyle in the future, right? We don't think, oh, these spoiled Americans, or, however you're supposed to pronounce it with the KKK Americans, like have too many damn treats and they need to, and they need to do without it. I mean, presumably we actually think that the living standard of working class Americans is not nearly what it should be. And certainly, fresh fruit doesn't seem like too much to ask for. There were a bunch of replies to this, which I don't know if we might not have actually. Yeah. So we want treats. We demand treats. We agree that it's a picture of a bunch of marching Nazis agreeing with my article. Crack Coben, right, with the KKK in the middle. That's my favorite, the crack Coben. So there's a lot of strong feelings about this, and a lot of sort of visceral dislike of this. This sort of idea that no, look, the sort of way the material abundance that has been provided by the machinery of global capitalism, we don't want to get rid of it, right? We want to more equitably and fairly distribute it. So this is, and honestly, I do think there is a dimension of moralism, of a sort of like aesthetic revulsion at consumption that's driving a lot of this, that I think is really politically not at all helpful. I think the sort of superficially best point that, was made in some of these responses is that the I didn't directly address the climate aspect of it in the article. I will point out that in those original tweets that started off all those weren't actually about climate. Those were about labor conditions. So I was responding to the argument that was made. But on climate, and then getting us back to the pawpaw tree, I did want to do a quick shout out to a segment that our friends David Griscom and Matt Leck did on our brother podcast, Left Reckoning, on this topic. I think we have that clip.
Bananas are like one of like carbon footprint incredibly minimal compared to like other products, right? Like palm oil and things like that. Carbon like limited in the amount of carbon that they produce just in the general sense, right? There's wasteful production, things like that. But putting bananas on a shipping boat, they last a really long time. That's why it's a global foodstuff, because they last a long time and you can ship them from the areas that grow bananas so that they can get, to Ohio, where somebody who is, might need some nutrition can get it. And just I brought that up because he says there need not be any moralism here. When you eat a banana, you are bad. So that's good. Don't feel bad about having a banana, but because it doesn't make any other than capitalist sense to create a world-spanning daily banana infrastructure for people in Columbus, Ohio. So no bananas for people in Ohio, right?
Well, there's the platform.
It's absurd politics, but like the economics and the ecology behind it are also silly. He notes here that we should go, we better get planting those pawpaw trees, right? Do you know what that is, Matt?
No.
It's a big like fixation of like the environmental movement, and I've known about it for kids because I grew up around a lot of hippies, right? It's like this story of a fruit that was that is indigenous to America that has fallen out of mass consumption. Well, actually mass consumption, it was very often eaten by like Native Americans and indigenous cultures. It grows in parts of the East Coast and through parts of the Midwest. It's supposed to be really good. I've never had one. They're hard to find, right? Because they never built up mass pawpaw groves, right, to grow them and to distribute them. Do you know why, Matt? Shelf life is about 2 days, so it's not a very efficient form of food, which is why it's more something that, like, if you want to find it, you have to really search for it and maybe go to somebody who might have some growing near them, right? So it's not a reasonable thing. It's like, yeah, we're going to start growing pawpaw trees on a mass scale to have like 1-2 day shelf life food. Just going to, that's wasteful.
Yeah. So saw in the chat, JB said, how do you propose to manage global consumption of fossil fuels in feasible socialism? I think that we desperately, urgently need to transition away from fossil fuels. It's not that we need to use them less, right? It's that we need to transition yesterday to alternative forms of energy. And this is, I think, a point that's easy to get mixed up about, but it's really important to be clear on, because I think this is where a lot of the debate goes awry, and people sort of miss each other's points, because when you say and God, I think about that specific, like the fact that Harris's example specifically fucking Ohio, which is like just a part of the country that has just been completely ravaged by late stage neoliberal capitalism. You think about, East Palestine and the derailment. You think about the, opioid epidemic. These are people who are, not doing well, and think, you know what I want to promise these people? You can't even have fucking fresh fruit in the grocery store. That's too much, you spoiled American. No treats for you. But when you say, okay, I want people to, I want us to have a vision of socialist abundance for people in Ecuador and Columbus, Ohio, all over the place. I think sometimes that gets misread as we should continue to produce in the way that we are right now. Of course, we can't do that ecologically. That's not possible. We have a climate crisis. We urgently need energy transition. But I think the point that people often miss in all this is that energy transition itself involves massive amounts of growth, right? It involves massive amounts of production. Like if you say, and fair enough, hey, at least for, like people who live in places like Los Angeles, it is absolutely absurd that you need to drive everywhere. It's bad for the environment for everybody in the city to have a car. We need much, much more public transportation, right? And we need, lots more and better public transportation going many more places. What you're describing is a massive building project, in that like small example. And I think, when you talk about the stuff that's in like the Green New Deal, like let's change the power infrastructure for every single building in the country. You're talking about massive growth, right? Massive employment, massive new construction, which is a good thing, right? There's no way to do the global climate transition that we need to do just kind of by hippie-ishly doing less, right? You need to build stuff, and you need to like just logistically for the sake of doing it. We're talking about massive growth, and then that I hope continue to do so to better meet human needs in more sustainable ways, which by the way is also the only political program that's going to make this happen, right? I think a lot of liberals have this idea that the main obstacle to climate change action is people not like believing that it's happening. I think I think like a much bigger problem is people not believing that the things that are going to be done to solve it are going to be in their interests. That it's going to be the entirely reasonable fear that's going to be done like kind of on the backs of the working class instead of in ways that benefit the working class, which again is why, as much as the phrase got poisoned and distorted, in right-wing propaganda, is why I actually thought the original Green New Deal framing was really good and really important. Okay, so the way that the article ends is by making this larger Marxist point about all of this. No society has ever voluntarily retreated to a lower level of productivity. It's unrealistic to expect that to happen in the future. If socialism, in the sense of the extension of democracy to the economy, is as bad at delivering consumption as socialism in the sense of what existed in places like East Germany, it will never become the dominant mode of production in the first place, and we'll never have to worry about the state of bananas under it. Instead, our vision has to be abundance made truly universal. The whole point of Marx's materialist theory of history is that capitalism, for all its horrors, wasn't an avoidable moral mistake, but a necessary phase of historical development that built up the most advanced economic machine for producing material abundance in human history. Whatever happens with this or any other particular project, and look, I don't have a crystal ball. I don't know what's going to happen with global weather patterns and what that means for banana production. The more general point is that distributing that abundance more equitably is a vision that can gain mass traction. Rolling it back is not. It's it's going to be red plenty or red nothing. Those are the options, guys. You have been watching free public content from Give Them an Argument. To access every single episode of the show, the main show on Monday nights, all of the streams, all of the debate breakdowns, all of the patron-exclusive postgames on Monday nights, all of the patron-exclusive bonus episodes every week, and much, much more, go to patreon.com/Ben Burgis. I cannot resist ending this with, don't be foolish.